The Empire Guardian skill costs 2 soul and causes allied units in the area to deal a flat amount more damage for 2 seconds. In my opinion, I believe this is the weakest Guardian skill in the game, but it does have its uses. If you have units that attack quickly or a lot of weak units, you can use it to deal a ton of damage. This is actually stronger now than before with the meta shifting away from tanks, and also this Guardian skill can be used on your own Guardian, which can be useful in some specific situations. Thymes is a 7 cost melee unit with a lot of HP and high single target damage. Her active ability deals a huge amount of AoE damage to the next enemy she attacks and has a 15-second cooldown. Whenever you summon another unit, her active ability cooldown resets, allowing you to use it again. Thymes is a very strong legendary that is useful in almost any situation, as she is a great tank, has high single target damage and high AoE damage through her active ability and her sense. If you have her, I would highly recommend you use her. Jacob is an 8 cost melee unit with a lot of HP and high AoE damage. He constantly increases the attack speed and movement speed of allies that are near him, and whenever the enemy summons a unit, he will fire a bolt towards and through where they are played to deal a good amount of damage. And this bolt can hit multiple enemies and will do damage to structures and guardians. The ability has a 3-second cooldown. I personally like Thymes more than Jacob, as her active ability just does a huge amount of damage and can be spammed easily, but Jacob is also a fairly strong legendary unit and has an AoE instead of having to rely on a skill. Astral Warp is a 2-cost spell that removes units in the area from the battlefield for 7 seconds. After 7 seconds, the units that were warped will return to the exact same spot that they were before the spell was cast and will take slightly more damage for another 7 seconds afterwards. Personally, I think this card is just a weaker version of Cryonia, though it still can be useful. I can't really think of any place I'd want to use Astral Warp instead of Cryonia, though. Lancer is a 5-cost card that summons 2 melee units that deal high AoE damage in a straight line. They essentially just pierce their target so they can hit medium-ranged enemies while attacking the enemy in front of them. They also boast a huge total HP pool, so overall they're very strong units. I would recommend you use them. Doramorph is a 5-cost spell that transforms the enemies into Mandoras and reduces their HP by a large percentage. Mandoras are essentially just Tubbies, but with the HP based off of the HP of the unit they transformed from. This card was extremely strong in the tank meta, but is slightly weaker now. It's still useful against legendaries, as after being transformed, units will lose all their abilities. If you're having trouble against strong units like legendaries or tanks, feel free to run 1 or 2 copies in your deck. Spine Shell is a 2-cost spell that will cause allies in the spell area to reflect a percentage of damage they take back at the attacker. I have seen Guardians kill themselves attacking spined units. This is a great card, and honestly I would say every Empire deck should run it. Shield is a 2-cost spell that causes allies in the spell area to take a percentage less damage for 6 seconds. It starts at 50%, so they'll take half damage, so it's fairly strong. It also applies to your Guardian, so it can be useful when defending. It's a strong card, but not necessarily a must-use, and as always, you do have to be careful not to have too many spells in your deck. Red Witch is a 3-cost ranged AoE unit that deals high damage, but attacks extremely slowly. Their sensibility permanently increases the damage by 20 whenever you play another card, or summon a unit, I should say. This card is good, but I wouldn't say it's great. It's a lot better at lower ranks, though, so if you've yet to hit Master, I would recommend you use her. Just be sure to make use of their sense, and make sure you keep her alive. Cryonia is a 3-cost spell that freezes enemy units in the spell area for a base of 9 seconds. It functions the exact same as a stun, so yeah, it's a 9 or more second stun for 3 soul. It is very, very strong. However, like always, you have to be careful about having too many spells in your deck. Unfortunately, most of the good Empire cards are spells, so you're going to have a hard time choosing which ones to use. Punchtank is a 4-cost AoE melee unit that knocks back enemies when it attacks. It also gets a 70% boost to movement speed whenever you play another unit, which is surprisingly handy. It's relatively tanky for a damage unit and does a huge amount of damage with each attack. Having 1 or 2 of these in your deck can help quite a bit when you need this specific unit for a specific situation. You can use it to push back Faceless Saints, take out swarm units, or you can knock an Ana out of charm range, and so on. It's a decent unit that's amazing in very specific situations. Fugitives is a 1-cost card that spawns 3 weak melee units. These units are really only good for proccing Sense and eating Painlings or War Pigs. I suppose you could also use them to try to kill a very squishy unit that has already started attacking something else. It's just a super cheap card for when you need a 1-cost. Ballisters is a 2-cost card that spawns 4 ranged units that deal decent damage. They die to things like AP Strafing and Stench, so they're pretty fragile. They're really cheap, so they're useful in sense decks. In my opinion, they're a great card, somewhat similar to Marines, but not quite as good in my opinion. Hammer Scouts is a 2-cost card that spawns 3 melee units, which are fairly tanky for a 2-cost, and also have just a bit less damage than Ballisters. I personally think this is a great card. It's very useful for delaying units and taking advantage of AI pathing, but they're also good for the Spine Shell or just killing things that have targeted something else. Siege Ram is a 3-cost melee siege unit that gains a large amount of HP whenever you play a unit. The max HP is added on top to the existing HP, so it effectively heals for the same amount. This unit is a decent unit and deals a huge amount of damage to the enemy if the enemy Guardian, if it's left unchecked. It's not one of the greatest cards, but it's not bad addition to the deck, especially if you're missing a lot of good cards. It can be a good substitute. Macer is a 3-cost card that spawns 3 melee units with low damage and a good amount of HP. They heal for a good amount of HP when you play another unit. These can be decent cheap tanks, especially if you're running Spine Shell, as the healing can turn into more damage from Spine Shell. Alright, finally, Brute Axe is a 4-cost card that spawns 3 high damage melee units with a good amount of HP. Whenever you play another unit, they permanently gain 30% attack speed. They're a great card that is often the center of high-ranking Empire decks. I highly recommend you at least try them out, but as I stated before, I'm personally not a fan of Sense decks. Not because they're not good, they work very well, it's just it doesn't fit my playstyle. So that's all I really have to say for this card. I personally think Spine Shell is the best way to play Empire, but there are quite a few ways to play it successfully, like every faction. I also personally think Empire takes the most thinking out of all the factions to play well, but that might just be a clash between my personal playstyle and the Empire. I hope this analysis was helpful, and as always, please let me know what you think, and if you have any questions or suggestions. Each video I've made has been different from the last, and that's due to me incorporating the feedback that you guys have given me. So if you notice a difference that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy, please let me know so I can continue to improve future videos. If you thought this video was helpful and or enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe and click that little bell looking button to be notified of my future videos. Best of luck climbing!